Okay, so today we'll just be having a short track guide of Silverstone for the SOR truck series. Just a quick couple of notes is that this is a pretty tricky track with regards to throttle application. There's a lot of long corners and you have to be really easy on the gas, otherwise you'll spin the tyres. There'll be a couple of incidences where you might see this on the lap, but they're not as bad as they can be, and I'll also point them out as we go around. So this is just coming to the start of the lap where we're just coming around the last corner. You basically want to be right on the inside curb, not quite touching it, but as close as you can be. And just wind the wheel off slowly and get into the gas. This kink here is actually pretty tricky in the truck. If you're not quite on the right line, you will drift wide and onto the grass, so be careful of that. Can take it flat, but it will get trickier on the old tyres, so keep that in mind. As you're coming down to the first corner, you'll see on the track we come under this bridge, and then there's just this line here where you cross between two different segments on the track. And you basically want to hit the brakes around this point. Then you want to change down to third, and you want to turn in somewhere between the marker board on the outside for the turn and the 50 mark. It's hard to say exactly where, but I'll just cut through this slowly and you'll see. So you see I'm about halfway between the two actually. You see I apex the roundabout probably a little bit early, just looking at it. You might want to cut in a little bit later, but it is tricky to get the truck to turn, so keep that in mind. You'll see we'll drift out all the way to the curb. You don't want to go any further out than this sort of layer of bricks type edge here. You certainly don't want to touch this green segment. As you come off of here, you want to upshift into fourth and go over to the right. The reason we're going over to the right is because we've got a left-right complex coming up, and we do not want to touch this curb on the inside of the left. Or if you do touch it, you want to be as straight as possible when you do, because it will unsettle the car. Don't go too far onto the curb here if you do go onto it, because you will get a 1x if you cut this grass here. But then for this second part, you want to cut the car right reasonably early, and you want to get the right sides up on the grass here. It's kind of blocked a little bit. Right, you see around about here. The reason for this is because you don't get a 1x when you run onto this, and the straighter you can make this segment here, the faster your lap will be. Now as you come around through this segment, you'll see that we start to drift, well, the hand's in the way, but we start to drift a little bit over to the left. That's okay, but you want to minimize that as much as possible, because you want to it's a trade-off as to how much speed you want to carry through the right-hander, but you want to be as far right as possible for the left so that you can get a nice cut here. Again, you want to be up on this curb, but not over. It's hard to see. I'll just cut it back a second. Right, you want to be up onto this edge where you can just see this segment beyond the curb, and this is kind of true around the whole track really. But you don't want to go any further because one, the grass doesn't have any grip, and two, you will pick up a 1x doing it. So as you can see, we cut up onto the curb, and the reason we're doing this really is just to straighten out this complex as much as possible. And as soon as we're done turning through there, we get the wheel back to the right, and we want to be as close to this inside curb as we can, because we want to get a really good run onto this straight. So we want to try and stay as far over to the right as we can coming out here. As you can see, it opens out, and then we've got this left. I actually don't really hit this that well, because if you can see, I'm actually coming out a little bit too wide. But the point is that you want you want to be as close to the right hand side as possible so that you can straighten this segment out. As you see here, we're actually pointing as though we're going to cut across there. Really, we want to be over on this side. We want to be much, well, not much further right, but probably about half a car to a car further right. You can use this curb a little bit, but again, you want to be careful because you can just about see here where you drop off the curb and that'll unsettle the car. And you want to carry as much momentum as you can through this segment because this is the longest straight on the track. So we change up the fourth and then we're coming down straight. You want to pull it across to the left and then we'll be braking around about this marker board here. You want to change down to second and then just before you hit this tarmac edge on the left hand side, you want to begin getting off the brakes and turning in. And once you start turning in, you want to really kind of roll this inside curb and get as close as you can so that you can straighten this exit out. The better you can keep to that inside curb, the more speed you're going to be able to carry off the turn. So the later you can get the car turned in and the later at the apex you can make, the straighter run you'll get off, and that'll be better both in terms of lap times and for your tyre wear. You can see there how we were a little bit too wide, but that's okay. Now as we come down into this section, this is a really tricky segment, you'll see this white line across the track. You want to begin braking just a little bit before, as you can see here. Again, down into second, but this time you're going to want to go all the way down to first. And the reason you're going to want to do that is because it's just so tight, and you're just going so slow. You really want to roll through here really slow. You can cut some of this curb, but don't go too crazy because you will get a 1x. As soon as you've cut through there, you want to pull the wheel back to the right, get it straight, start turning immediately for the right hander, and you want to get your right sides as close to that curb as possible, and you want to keep them there. So you see we start to gradually bring the throttle in, maybe a fraction too soon, because you can see we're going a little bit wide, but we are cutting back towards the curb. And you really have to balance through here the throttle and the steering input, because this is one of the key corners to the track. One, because if you get this right and you're behind someone and they slip up, you're gonna have a big chance into the next segment to make a pass. But secondly, this is a place where you can just kill your tires. Totally destroy them if you're just on the gas too early, because as you'll see here a little bit, you can see the wheel input. We're having to counter it a little bit, not too much, but if you get on it too soon, you're gonna have a huge slide, and it's just really bad for your tires. You see we had a little wiggle there. You basically want to be only really getting to full throttle as you're getting to the DRS sign. Just a fraction before that, if you look, you see I had a little bit of a moment there, but I was probably on full throttle a little bit too early here, and that's why I had that moment. But really you should be aiming to be full throttle just before the DRS board. Like I say, I think it's probably a bit too soon. Can get to it earlier, but as the run goes on, there's definitely a good marker to use. Now as we're coming down into this left-right complex, you'll see we have this little opening here on the right-hand side. We want to be hitting the brakes around about the end part. You see there, I lift off as I'm getting about just as I'm going past this opening, and you can see that I begin braking just as I'm really going past this white line. But you can use this whole area as a marker. You can brake at the start, the middle, the end, but the later you brake, it's going to be harder to get it stopped for this turn. We're going down to second here, and then we leave it quite late because it's quite a tight left-hander that cuts back onto itself quite a bit, and we've got that right-hander immediately afterwards. We want to use a good deal of curb here. As you see the hands in the way again. I need to turn those off in future. But as you can see, we're up on the curb with the left sides, and then we're still pointing a little bit left here, but as you'll see, we're cutting it back straight, And then again we're doing the exact same thing on the right hand curb, but you want to be careful here because again it's not a huge straight, but it is semi important for carrying some speed, and you will lose time if you get on this curb too much and you have to back out of it, which I think I did. Yep, you see I dropped to half throttle. You might have to do that because you get a little bit of a slide on the exit there before you get back to the gas. Now coming down under the bridge, you want to brake at the start of the shadow. If you see here, I begin to brake just before I touch the edge of the shadow, and then I turn in reasonably early, get the right sides close to the curb, probably turned in a touch too early here, and then I'm about half throttle, well, quarter to a half throttle through this segment because you want to carry speed, but you don't want to be too far to the left because you've got this 90-degree left straight afterwards, so you want to be able to pull it back across to the right, to this close to this white line here. And as you see, we're cutting again onto the inside, just getting the left sides just up onto this curb. Not a lot of gas because it's a really short straight. You just don't want to burn the tires up through here. And then as we're coming down into this left-hander right near the end of the lap, it's hard to see, but we're braking just sort of at the end of this curb. And then this is another point where we go back down to first and we cut as far up onto this curb as we can with the left sides because we don't get a 1x. And then we just slowly unwind the wheel and drive into the final turn. Same deal we did when we were coming on to the start of the lap. Just brake gently, roll around the inside edge of the corner, and then we start to get back in the gas as we begin to unwind the wheel here. As you see, this is actually something that is useful for all corners, so I'll just go over it a little bit here because we can see it quite nicely. Basically, as I begin to put the throttle in, I'm already accepting it's going to start going wide, but the other thing I'm also doing is, as you see, I begin to unwind the wheel as I add throttle in, and I'm only getting the full throttle as the wheel is almost straight. And you see I was a little bit early here because I was on the curb. You can get on the curb, but just be wary, it's going to make you a little loose. And then as we're coming through to the end of the lap, again, just be careful here. You want to be close to the inside, but you don't want to go too far. You'll get a slowdown if you go beyond the bollards too much. Again, you can keep it flat, but you will get a bit of slide as the end of the lap. It's a 152.8. And that's with the SOR setup that'll be uploaded on the forum, and with default weather conditions, as you can see here.